Hello, this is Randy with Excel for Freelancers, and welcome to the School Manager Part 20. In this final training of an incredible series, I'm going to show you how you can create this incredible single-click dashboard, complete with profit and loss, a student attendance report, and report cards in which you can create a single report card, or you can generate all report cards in a single click. It's going to be an incredible training. I cannot wait. So let's get started. All right, thanks so much for joining me today. I'm going to create this incredible dashboard right along with you. I cannot wait. It's going to be a great training. I've got so much to cover in this final series. First of all, if you are here, that means you probably have joined our first 19. So I wanted to give you a big congratulations on that. Thank you for sticking with me on this incredible series. Next week, something brand new. I can't wait to share that with you. But this week, we're going to complete the dashboard. Now, of course, you can create so much more in this School Manager. There's so much that can be added. All you need to do is just click on the link down below, either with your email or with your Facebook Messenger, and we'll get that sent over to you absolutely free. Of course, if you do like these trainings and you want to create your own, I've got an incredible promotion in our mentorship program. I'm going to show you step by step how you can create your own applications from scratch and sell them for passive income. In fact, right now I've got an incredible promotion for just $7. You can get the first 5 weeks of this program, just $7. That's going to be over 8 hours of training. We're going to include 5 weekly modules, and of course, we're going to get you all the content to get you started. That's going to be a temporary promotion, so make sure you click the link down below, $7 to get you started. All right, I want to get started right away. This is the sample. I'll be creating this. I'm going to save this and close this. This is what we're going to be creating. By the time we get done with this training, it's going to look just like this. Okay, so I'm going to save it. This is the sample. We're going to close it out. Now, I did get a little bit of a head start because we already know how to create these menus. We've done in the prior. And this single click, all I've done is just pretty much format this here because I know we're going to put in 3 reports. Now, of course, you can add as many reports as you want in this incredible format. I'm going to show you how to do that in this training. So it's going to be incredible, and we've got a lot to cover. The first thing what I want to do is just go, we already know this hide sheet. This is used for user security, so we understand that. This I'll keep blank. I want to know the report number. If I select here, I want that report number 1 to show up. Okay, so I want to keep that in mind. I want to know in the selected student row, we're going to use this when it comes to report cards, right? I want to know what row, when we select on which report, which student to display those report cards, I want to know there. And I also want to know the student ID when we select it. That's going to be for this report card, this report here. So we're going to have that. I also want to have a terms, right? I want to have a drop-down list of terms, so I want to put that here. And then I want to have the text of that term. I want to know the from date. What date is it from? For example, if we're going to do 5/1, I want to know that from date. And if we're going to do the 5/31, I want to know that to date. So these dates are really important because as we change the term, we're going to change that. I wanted to know. Now, keep in mind that our terms are going to come directly from the admin. So when we look at scheduling, or actually it's going to be classes and starting, we see, let's take a look here, classes. Here we go. Here's our terms right here. So I want to drop down the list of these terms. So when I select term 1, I want these 2 dates. Or when I select this date, I want these dates to show up, right? So that's very important so that we can understand how we are going to be able to create these terms and look at that. So how are we going to do that? Well, the first thing, we already have a named range called terms here. If we look into the formulas name manager, and we go to, let's bring it over here, we go to click in terms, we have the terms, and it's based on this. It's a dynamic based on these terms here. So that's what I want to create a drop down list on that. So that's the first thing what we're going to do inside our dashboard screen is create a drop down list. So from the developers tab, what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert, and I'm going to insert here this particular combo box here. So I want to put it right about here because that's the first thing what I want, and I want it based on the terms. So if I right click here and format that control, what is the input range I want? I want to make sure that that is equal to terms here. And also, so now when we have it, okay, good. So we have our terms here. We can shrink that up a little bit. We want to make sure it's okay here, but I want to maybe just shrink it up a little bit to the width of maybe just 1. Keep it simple. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to have obviously a label here, but I want to do more in that. I want to make sure that what link is it connected to? So I want to know the selected term, and I'm going to make, in this case, I'm going to make it B6. So that's going to, so as we change that, it's going to be dynamic, so that when we change that here, it's going to show up 2 or the first one or 1. But now what I also want to do is I want to display what term text, because I'm going to use that in a report. What is the text? Term 2, 2021, term 3. I want to display that here. So how are we going to do that? Well, we can use, of course, just a simple index and match here. So first of all, let's just do if error in case there's an error. I don't want it to display anything, just in case. So if error, and then we'll go up here. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to index. And what am I indexing? I'm indexing the terms. That's the form we're using. That's the name range here. What is the row number? I'm going to use the row number is basically this right here. We've already selected it. So all we need to do is just click B6. And we want the column number. Okay. And if there's an error, just to show blank. Okay. So now as we change this term, it's going to change here. So that's pretty much what I want. Also, the from and to date, those are very important. What I want to do is I want to assign named ranges to those, because we're going to use those inside formulas. So I'm going to call this from and then DT. And then I'm going to call this one to DT, because it's much easier to use it in formulas if we understand. So this is going to be the from date and to date. We can see that up there. All right, the student, this will come in later, and then this will come in later. Now I also want conditional formatting, so that I've already actually added that in. So if I change this to 1, I want to make sure that this goes right. Now I've added it in to just save us a little time, but if we take a look, in the conditional formatting we manage rules, basically it's based on this. So B3 equals row minus 2, right? I want to show report number 1, but I want it to highlight line number 3, row number 3, right? Report number 1, I want it to highlight. So how do we do that? It's basically B3 is going to be equal to row, in this case 3 minus 2, so it's going to be 1. So that's the match. And basically just to format it, which is going to be the same, I want that bold dark blue, and then I want the white background, so that as we select these, as I select these, this is going to change to 2, or this is going to change to 3, and it's going to allow us to highlight the selected report. So when we add our VBA in here, we'll be able to do that. Okay, great. So let's save our work so far. So now what we want to do is when I select a term, I want those dates to show up, those from and to dates to show up here in text. So we're going to need a little bit of a text box. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click Insert. I'm going to insert a text box here. So the first one's going to be, we'll just call this term, and then I'll format that accordingly, and then I'll duplicate it for the from and to. But before we do, why don't we format this just the way we want it. I'm going to drop this down while we're formatting it. Go into the format, and we'll give it a height of 0.23. I want to give everything, not 2.3, but 0.23. And then we'll give it a width of something like 0.5 or something, just something similar. Okay, so that's going to be it. And then I make sure we want to format those so everything fits. So we're going to go into the size and properties here, and then just go into the text box here. And the left margin can be 0.03, and the right can be the 0.03. The top can be 0 and 0. We're going to center that anyways. So we want to get it just the way we like it. And then I'm going to right justify that and put it in the middle. And I want a no fill on that, so no fill, and then we'll put a gray border around it, something similar to what is already there. It's something like this would be good. Okay, so that's what I like. I like that there, and just move it around, and then we'll make it consistent. So I've got that at a height of 0.23. I'm going to make sure that this also contains 0.23 so that everything's got the same height. All right, so we've got the term here, but now what I want is the to and from date. So I'm going to duplicate that, Control D, and I'm going to change this to 2. And then I'm going to do the same thing, and I'm going to put that here. Actually, let's say from, and I'll duplicate that and make that from and bring it over to the right side. Okay, so we've got that, and now what I want to do is, so we've got the term, from, and to. So what I want to do is I want to put fields in here. So again, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to insert the shape. This time we'll another text box, and this time I'll put that text box right around here. It'll be slightly different. I'll do a white background on this, but similar. So in this case, we will do, again, the height 0.23, keeping the same height. We'll do the width as 1 to make sure that it's probably a bit too big. It might be okay because our dates are going to be a bit bigger on this because we might have larger dates. So how do we do that? All right, so let's give this a white background and then the shape fill of white, and we'll do the same borders here. I want the borders to be that same gray so that everything's consistent here. So the shape outline, making sure that it's this gray. Okay, I like that. And what this is going to be our from date. So when we want it from, I want to make sure it's linked to here, our from date. So all we need to do is just equals, and then select B8. We might make sure the equals the from date. It's also the from date. Okay, again, let's reset it back to 0.23. I want to make sure that that's consistent with all. And I'm going to duplicate that using Control D. And I'm going to bring it over here to the 2. So now in this case we have again 0.23, keep resetting that. It's probably got auto text, which we don't want. So I want to make sure that the auto text, auto height, auto width is set, not set. So we can make sure that we'd hit that and go into the properties. We want that resize text to fit shape. We don't resize shape to fit text. We don't want that, right? We don't want that auto fit there. And so, all right, good. I like that. That's why it was auto fitting. So term, from, and to. So let's line everything up by holding down the control. And like that, make sure that all the heights are even. That's the way I want it. Aligning them to the middle. Perfect, just the way I want it. Now I'll check. Okay, I like that. It's nice. Keeping this, let's move this a little bit over here so that it's consistent. Perfect, that looks really good. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to group these together, and then what I want to do is assign a name to them and also make sure that the size and properties. So again, line everything up here, going to group them together, and then the first thing we want to do is make sure that we do not size those things. You just want to move it. So that's move, but don't size with the cells. So that's good. So we've got, and I'm going to give this a name. We're going to call it term group. Okay, very good. So now when our date changes, so now when we date change, we need to make sure that our date changes are from and to dates change here. So we'll do that with a macro, but we got everything set up just the way we like it. Okay, so we're going to bring this over to the left. That won't change positions. We'll use that for various reports. All right, all we need to do is just link this last one here. This one particularly, I want to link that. That's going to be the to date, not the from date. So that's it. The to date is what we have there. And now it's going to automatically link there and it'll change. So that means whenever we change this term, all we need to do is update both B8 and B9. Why don't we do that now so we can automate that? So the best way to do it is go into the developer and then Visual Basic. Okay, so once we're in here, of course, we're going to go inside our, I've got just some modules that I created, but there's not much in them. Dashboard miscellaneous. So what we're going to do is we have one for clear reports, which is fine, and one for term change. So when we change the term, that is when we want those dates to change. So it's relatively easy. So how are we going to do that? Well, first of all, we're going to dimension the term row. I need to know the row. Term row as long. We're going to focus on the dashboard. So with dashboard, and just to make sure you have the sheet name, click the dot, put the dot in here, the period, and we'll make sure that IntelliSense appears, and we know we've got it. If, okay, dot range, we want to make sure that B6, let's take a look. B6, we want to make sure it contains a value. We'll bring this up here. B6 has to contain a value. If it doesn't, then we can't do anything. If B6 does contain a value, then what do I want to do? Well, then I want to determine whatever is in admin, AY, and the specific, look, it starts in row 15. So if we've selected the term 1, it's a 1, then we just need to add 14 and whatever's in AY, and then add in whatever's in 14 plus whatever the term in AZ. So we just need to add that in, and I need to place those directly inside B8 and B9. So that's all we're going to do right inside the dashboard. Okay, so let's do that. So we're going to place it in B8 and B9. So let's write up that inside the macro and we can get that going. So if dot range B6 dot value does not equal empty, if it does, then there's nothing. If it equals empty, we can just exit the sub. Equals empty, then exit sub. Okay, assuming that it is not empty, we can then assign it to a variable. So we're going to call that term row is going to be equal to, and we'll just put that as term row. Once we have that, what we can do is then set B8 and B9. Dot range B8, that is our from date, B8 value, equals admin dot range AY. Remember AY, and also we need to add on the term row, or we can add it onto this term row. We could probably add it on here. So remember, it's going to be plus 13, right? We want it. So here inside the admin, if our first one's, we have 14 actually. So if our first row is 15, right, then we need to add 14 onto that. So we just add in the 14. We can add it right here onto the form of 14. Okay, so then AY and our term row dot value. That's going to be the from date. We can copy that and just update that to the to date and change it to B9, change it to AZ. So here, updating that, now copy that, and then bring it over here. So B9, which is our to date, is going to be equal from AZ in the term row, and that's going to be our to date. So that's all we have to do. Then we just assign that macro there. And all right, perfect. So that's going to be it. Let's save our work. Now, again, I'm just going to assign this macro. As we change the terms, it's going to assign. So back into the dashboard screen here, taking this particular item here, this one here, right-clicking that, assigning the macro, and pasting that macro in. Now, when I change that term row, we're going to see the dates change. Okay, so let's look at term 1, 1/21 to 4/1. Double check. January 21st to April 1st. I like that. Let's format these the same the way that they're formatted, and we'll just use the short date. So we can, okay, 1/21 to 4/1, that's looking perfect. We're going to keep it, let's put it on term 2 because that's where most of our data is. So I'll keep it on there. Back inside the dashboard, changing that to term 2, it updates those dates very nicely. Okay, so the idea is that we're going to refresh whatever report we're on when we change the date, but we don't have any reports yet, so we're going to create those now. First one I want to do is the profit and loss report. So when I select this, I want that profit and loss report. Now, where does that information come from? Well, it comes from our transaction database. This is our database. So basically what I want to do is take all these transactions, determine if they're income or expenses, and also determine if they're within our specific date range, right? Only within the date range. If that transaction date is within that date range, then I want to determine all the income and all of them. And I want to list it by whatever categories they're on. So for example, if I want to know the total fees within that date range, I want to know the total salaries, and I want to know the total supplies, if they're expenses or income. I want to list all the income first, then I want to total the income, then I want to list all the expenses, and then I want to determine the profit based on that, which is the income minus expenses. So what we want to do is have some criteria. So we have income, so we got some. First thing what I want was determine all of the income using an advanced filter based on those 2 date ranges. So if I create this criteria, which I already created, and base it on the from date, so it's going to be greater than the from date. Notice we want these in this number format. I don't want them in date format here. That's exactly the format that I want. Those are dates based on just the numbers. And I want it less than or greater than 2 date. We've given those name ranges. I've already added them in. So the first, what we're going to do is we're going to run an advanced filter based on this criteria. The second time we're going to run an advanced filter based on this criteria. I only want to know the expenses in that. And then what I want to do is I want a list of categories. I want a list of categories that come here based on this criteria. So based on this criteria, I want to know all the categories. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a formula. And that formula is we're going to update that formula here based on this, right? So how do we do that? Well, the first thing what I want to do is I want to create some named ranges or update some named ranges. Notice that I've got now type here and category, but I want to make sure that there's named ranges based on those. So if we look in the formulas, the name manager under transaction, because I want categories, I've got transaction amount. I need that. That's good. Transaction category, that's going to be wrong. Well, not wrong, but I just need to update the name because transaction category, I want it based on this. So let's take a look at what that is inside the admin and then rename it. So when we look at transaction settings, so I've got categories here, which is fine. I need a list of categories, but I just want to rename them a little bit. So let's go back into the name manager here in the formulas and take a look at those transaction categories here. Transaction category. Okay, so it's these categories, which is fine, but let's just update that name and we're going to call it, we're going to keep the trans for transaction categories. Let's do categories, or we just want to rename that. Keep it separate. Keep your name ranges clear. So transaction categories, we're going to call it that. That's what I like, transaction category. That looks good. Okay, so let's go ahead and update that and then tab it over. Perfect. So I'm going to keep transaction. Now what I'm going to do is go back into the transactions database here, and I'm going to create a name range based on these categories because that's what I want. And I also want to make sure we have type as well. So into the formulas and name manager, this case transaction. Okay, we're going to focus on transaction ID. I'm going to use that as our format. So we've got name and we've got a few others. So let's create one for categories. I'm going to copy this one, click new, and we're going to call this trans category. Okay, paste that in, except in this case, we're going to make the difference of column L. So I want to set that on column L, not column A, which is our ID L. Tab out, tab in. There we go, because I want to run totals based on these categories. Click OK and click close. Okay, so now we see we have that. So now what I want to do is I want to run a sum if. So if I list all of those categories here based on those dates, I want to create a sum. I'm going to take this formula here and bring it all the way down. So if I put in fees or something, I want that here. So let's check it. Look, I've got it, but I want to update our, so we have transaction amount, transaction date, and then we have, so we want to make sure from date here, we want to make sure we have from date, the criteria is going to be the from date. And I also want to make sure that we have those. So this one I need to replace. Remember, we need to update this one to the one we just created, transaction category. That's the one we want. Okay, there we go. And I want to do the same thing with this because we renamed it. So I want to base it on that transaction category. Okay, again, so what I'm doing is simply determining, here we're going to use sum transaction amount. That's what we're summing. We're going to base it on the transaction date and it must be greater than or equal to from date. Also, the transaction date must be less than or equal to to date, and the transaction category has to be whatever is in X3. This way, as I add in these results, and then I'm going to just bring this formula down here. Those are going to be all for our income. Once I have those totals, then what I want to do is do the same thing, but for expenses. I want to know all the expense categories. Then I want to bring this formula down. But that way, we don't have extra formulas. When we recreate this report, we can clear everything else out, and that keeps our workbook really light because I don't have these formulas sitting here if we're not needed. Then what I want to do is I want to know the total income. So it's going to use the sum of the total income, and I want to know the total expenses, which is going to be the TUM. These are going to help me when I total those, okay? So now all we need to do within the macro is do just two things. One, we need to run an advanced filter based on this information here. And let's give those a color because those are all formulas and they're fixed. So let's give that a color and then we'll just give that a border. I'll drop this down and then we'll just give it a border here. Okay, so we have that, not this one here. So we have that here, income, which is fixed. I want based on these dates. So our first advanced filter is going to here for income. Our second advanced filter criteria is going to be here. So let's write that up right now inside the macro so we know what we're going to do. We're going to write our first macro for that profit and loss report. We're going to first our primary starting out just based on this information, based on the transaction database. So we're going to go back into the VBA, and now I have a module created called dashboard reports. And this is the one we're creating, profit and loss. But before we do that, we need to dimension some variables on that. So let's do that right now. So we're going to dimension, we need the last row. We're going to use that along as we get the last row of whatever database we're working with as long. I also want to know the last expense row. We need to keep track of what the row is as long because the expenses and income are going to have different. Also, of course, the last income row, as long. Also, if I'm keeping track of what row we're on the dashboard, I need to know what row we're on as we build that P&L. So dashboard row is going to equal as long. And also, I want to know the last result row, because we're running an advanced filter. So we need to know where those results come to. Okay, as long. Also, I want to know the report row. When we select it, this will become in handy in other reports as long. Okay, and we're going to set the report range because we're going to set the print range. So we need to do that. And we're going to also copy and paste it over from our staging area up into our main report area. So dimension the report range as a range. So we're going to use that for each of the reports. So, all right, good. Now we're ready to create our report for our profit and loss. The first thing what I want to do is create a staging area where we're going to build that. And it's going to be off here. So we're going to build it out inside here. Let's use a starting with AA and then for each one. So I'm going to bring it right here. Now I want to keep the row consistent. My first row, wherever I want to put that information, is in row 4. So in our staging area, I'm also going to keep it as row 4. This helps for conditional formatting. So the first thing what I want to do is give it a name and that report name, and we'll do that inside A4. So what is it? It's going to be dynamic. So because it's going to be based on the term. So we're going to call this equals, and then we'll do profit. It's profit and loss. And then, of course, I want to do it from what? From, put a dash in, from, and then it's going to be a date. So we need to set that date. What is it? Space, and it's going to be the from date, right? I just don't want to put in the from date because it's not going to be formatted. So what I want to do is I want to format that specifically. So it's going to be text. And what format do I want to assign that date? And we'll just do, you can do any format you want, but I'll just do mm/dd/YYY. And then close it. Okay, so that's the from date. And what else? And I want to add the to date. And so, and space to, right? Because we want to do to, another space, and then also want to do the to date. So now all I need to do is just copy this here and then just change the variable instead of from date to the to date. So that's easy. Okay, to date. Okay, good. Let's take a look at that and we'll see how that works. All right, so that's what I want pretty much. Good, that's going to go. But I do want to assign it that our specific format that we're using that's common throughout the application. And we've saved that in cell styles. We're going to give it that table title. And I'm going to stretch it out probably all the way to, let's say, AD. I want to do that. So AD is going to take it all the way because I'm going to create about 4 columns for this one. So we're going to assign that cell style all the way through AD. But I want to make sure that it's merging across the center. Now, I don't want to use merge and center, but I do want to use center across selection. So what I'm going to do is highlight all these, and then you can either right click or click here. And what I want to do is inside here, the alignment, I want to make sure you put center across selection. Okay, click OK. That helps us. We don't need to use merge and center. All right, so we're going to create some spaces here. And now what I want to do, the first thing I want to do is I want to put income in here. This is where our income is going. This is going to be fixed, this word here. Then everything dynamic is going to appear here. All right, so the first thing what I want to do is I want to list all of the income here. We can bring this over. So I want to list all the income accounts here. And then inside AC, I want to list all the amounts here. So all those amounts are going to be brought over from the tree. Then what I want to do is I want to put total in here. I want to put total income. And then right here, I want to have the total. Then I'm going to list the expenses, then all the expenses down here, all those expense amounts here, and then here total expenses here, and then another line called total profit. So that's how I want to build it out, just using these 4 columns. It's going to be relatively simple. So how are we going to do that? Well, we use that, of course, our macro. So let's continue on with our macro and see just how that's going to work. Okay, so here it is right here. So profit and loss report. So first thing what I want to do is I want to clear out any prior results from our dashboard. So dashboard dot range. And we're going to clear the contents out. So what am I going to clear out? Well, the first thing what I want to do is clear out all the way. Let's starting out here from AA6. I want to keep this income here because that's not going to change. So all the way from AA6 to AD and all the way down. Let's clear anything out, any prior results here. So we can do that here. AA6 through AD, and then just use large number 99, dot clear contents, dot clear contents. Not the formats, of course, just the contents. Okay, so once we have that, we can now focus on the transaction database. And what are we going to write inside there? So let's bring this up here, and then we'll go into the transaction database, not transaction database, and start working. Of course, we're going to run that advanced filter based on the last row. We know our criteria here. Results are going to come right in here. The results only in X3. Then I'm going to determine the last row, and then I'm going to take this format and bring it down to the last row. So that's what we're going to do, and we're going to do that right in VBA. So let's write that up. So the first thing, of course, is I want to clear any contents. Again, I want to make sure that we've cleared anything that might have come in here. So let's go ahead and clear out all the way from X all the way through, let's just say AA. Clear anything out, X3 all the way over to A3. So let's do that. So dot range X3 through AA, and then just use a large number. And then we're just going to clear those contents out. Dot clear. So clearing prior results. We always want to do that. Okay, once we've done that, then what I want to do is we're going to set our last row. Last row is going to be equal to our, of course, column A. That's going to get us our last row. If we don't have any data, we need to exit out. If the last row, in this case, is less than 3, then exit sub. So assuming that we do have there, then we can move on. Now, what do we want to do? Well, we want to run our advanced filter. So advanced filter, and it's going to be based on this. I use auto hotkey for that, just in case you didn't know, but you know now because you're on the 20th episode. Okay, so again, we want to run it based on our headers. Where's our headers located? Our headers are located right here inside A3. We need to make that less than 4, actually. So our headers are located right here. And then what I want to do is go all the way to L, and then that's going to give us, in this case, L is fine. So A3 to L. So A3, in other words, less than 4, right? Because it could be there. 4. I want to make that 4. Our first one's going to be on 4. All right, so A3 all the way to L in the last row. And then where is our, make sure the last row, the variable is correct, last row. Then our criteria is going to be all the way over here based on that criteria. Remember, I said income first, so it's going to be based on S2 all the way through U3. That is our criteria here. So change this to S2 2 all the way through U3. And where do we want those results to go? I want those results simply only in one is X2. That's where our results are going to go. That's all I want to do. So keeping it simple, X2, and we do want unique records. So X2, that's going to give us our unique categories based on those dates, only on those dates. Then I wanted to determine the results. So what are the last results row? But I only want to do the last income row. I want to know the last income row. I want to keep the income and expenses separate. So the last income row is equal to, in this case, we're going to use column X. So column X. And of course, I want to know, do we have an income? Maybe we don't have an income. So we need to test that. If the last income row is less than 3. So if the last income row is less than 3, then we need to skip bringing down those formulas. Then go to, let's call it no income. And then down here, we'd write in no income. But before that, assuming that there is income, we can then copy down those formulas. Okay, so what is that formula? Well, it's simply being basically Y3 all the way down to the last row is equal to Y1 based on just the formulas. Formulas, not values. So dot range Y3 through Y in the last income row and the last income row dot formula, not values, dot formula equals dot range and then Y1. Our formula is located in Y1, and that's going to be the formula dot formula. Okay, so that's going to be income formula. Now that we have that, now we can focus on the expenses. Okay, so what are those expenses? So now what we could do is run another advanced filter. So I'm just going to basically copy this, right? We've already got the last row, and then I'm just going to make the updates for expenses. So I'm going to paste it down here and then just make the updates accordingly. Okay, so we have the last row, but our criteria is going to change. Our criteria is now based on expenses. So here it's going to be T2 through V3, T2 through V3. That's where it's going to be based on these types. I only want those expenses. So our criteria is going to change slightly. So we can update that. So T2 through V3. And our results are going to be our results are going to be located in Z now, Z. That's where our expenses are going to, I want those expense categories here, Z2. And again, the last row is going to be based on what's in Z here, not X. Then if the last, in this case, it's going to be last expense row. We want to keep those variables separate. So last expense row. And if the last expense row is less than 3, then go to no expense, something different here. Bring that down here. And we're going to go bring it down here called no expense. So we skip that. And then updating the formula, this time our formula is located in AA. For expenses, it's AA. So we do that AA, last expense row, not income in this case. And then also it's going to be AA, and then we'll just change the memo, and this is called expense formula. Okay, so now we have it all, expense formula. Good, I like that. We're pretty much done with that. Now all we need to do is just bring that information over through VBA, bring it over through and start looping through it. So we can do that. Okay, so now that we have all of our income and all of our amounts here, what I want to do is take this information, bring it directly inside the dashboard. I want to place it right in here. So starting with AB6 and all the way down, I want to bring in that, but I only want to make sure that there actually is income. If there's no income, there's nothing to bring over. So we do need to double check that. So going to say here inside here, starting down right here, if the last income row is greater than 2, then do something. Then what do I want to do? Then dashboard, we want to bring that information over. So here, dashboard range starting with AB6 all the way through AC and the last income row plus 3. Why we're adding 3? Because we're starting on row 6 and here we start on row 3, right? So there's a difference. So we're starting on row 3 in the database for our transactions, but 6 on our dashboard. So we need to compensate for that difference. Dot value equals, where is it going to equal? It's going to be equal basically all of our income here. So we go into the transaction database equals X3 through Y in the last income row. So we just need to update that equals dot range X3 through Y and the last income row dot value. So it's going to bring over income details. Good, so that covers our income. Okay, but what I want to do is I want to keep track of what row we're on. I want to know what row. We just brought it over all the income, but I want to keep track of whatever row we're on. So I need to have a variable called dash row, and that's going to keep track of that row. So let's update that. And of course, it's going to be basically starting on here plus our last dashboard. So we need to update that. So let's put in that variable right now. So bring it over here. So the dashboard row is going to be equal to, in this case, the last income row plus 4. And then we'll set the that's going to change as we go through a dashboard row. Okay, continuing on. Now that we have that, what I want to do is I want to put in the total income. Now, we've just put in all the balances, but I want to, right here, I want to put in the word total, or whatever row, total income. And then inside AD, I want to actually put that total income. So the text here, total income, and here, I want to put that amount. So that amount, of course, is going to come directly from here. We already have that calculator here to make it easy for us in AB2. So let's put in the text, and then we're going to do that. So dashboard dot range AA and the dashboard row dot value equals total income. Make sure we put the equals there. Okay, so that's going to be our total income text, but now what I want to do is I want to place that amount, that total. So where's that total going to go? That total is going to go inside AD, and where's it going to come from? It's going to be coming from the equals right here, AB dot range AB2. That's going to be our total income amount, total income. Okay, good. I like that. Now what we need to do is we need to increment that dashboard row. So the dashboard row equals dashboard row plus 1. We need to do a line note. Now I want to place those expenses here, right? So now what I want to do is I want to copy this here, paste it here, but now I want to put in expenses. So instead of total income, expenses. We want to know those expenses. It's going to be AA. We've already incremented the row here, so that's going to cover that. And then what I want to do is add in those expenses. So we're ready to do that. We can increment the row one more time because I only want one single row for the expense, just the word expense, just like we have here inside our dashboard. We have one for income. Now we've listed the total income. Now I want to put the word expense. I want to put our expenses down here, and then total expenses, and then total profit here. Okay, so let's go ahead and go back in there, and let's write that up right now in just a few lines of code. Just want to make sure that we actually have that we have expenses. So if the last expense row, just like it did, is greater than 2, then we're ready to write then dashboard dot range. Going to go and say AB, where is it located, and the dashboard row. We've already incremented it 1, so that's good. And colon AC, it's going to come through there, and we got to get the last. It's going to be in this case, and the last dashboard row plus what? Plus the last expense row minus 2. And that's what it's going to go, and I'll explain why in a minute. Dot value is equal to, and then our expenses are coming from Z3 dot range, Z3 right above Z3 all the way through AA and the last expense row. Why? You see how our expenses start on row 3, so we need to subtract 2 to determine the total number of expenses in that row. And the last expense row. Okay, excellent. We've got one more row to compensate for inside the dashboard. So let's make that minus 3. Let's check out. I think that's going to work fine. All right, so good. Now we've added all in the expenses. So now we just have to add in total expenses and the amount. So I'm just going to copy this here because we did something. I'm going to drop this down, and then I'll just update it for expenses here. So in this case, AA and the dashboard row, we need to increment the dashboard row before we do that. So we want to make sure that we're keeping consistent with the dashboard. So what is the dashboard row going to be? It's going to be the dashboard row is going to be equal to here. Let's put this in dashboard row. This is going to be our last one right here. So this is what our is going to be. In this case, it's minus 2 in this case. So our dashboard row, updating that dashboard row based on all the expenses, is equal to here the last expense row plus the dashboard row. But this is the case, the minus 2. This is where I want to subtract 2. So this is going to update our dashboard row here. But I want to subtract 2, so we have 1. In this case, our next is total expenses. I want to put in total expenses. And where's our expenses coming from? It's coming directly right here from AC2. That's where our total expenses are. So AC2, and just update this text, total expenses. Okay, good. So now we have that. Now all we're going to do is increment the dashboard row one more time. We want to put in that total profit. So paste that in here and copy this again here. In this case, we can copy and update that. This time we're going to have profit. We'll just call this profit. And where's our profit going to come? It's going to be basically simple. It's going to be our total income minus our total expenses. So just right here, all we need to do is just add that in here. So based on those, it's going to be, in this case, AB. Let's copy this here and then subtract AB from AB. AB, total income minus our total expenses. That's going to get us our total profit. Total profit. Okay, I like that. Relatively easy. We do need to add in some additional conditional formatting to make it look good, but let's take a look at that and we'll run that. Okay, saving our work. We'll check for any bugs here and then we can move on. Okay, so let's see. We've got fees 400. We've got supplies, salaries 400. That looks good. Total income 400. Total expenses 270. Let's go into our dashboard, see how that looks. We've got income, fees at 400. I like that. Total income 400, correct. Expenses, salaries and supplies, good. Total expenses 270. Profit 400 minus 270, 130. Okay, so everything looks good. We do need to get some conditional formatting, and it's kind of an ugly report. So why don't we do that now? All right, so the first thing what I want to do is I want to put bold anything that's in our left column here. I want to bold the entire line. So I'm just going to go all the way down here. I'm going to add in some conditional formatting. And let's pin this for a second, conditional formatting, new rule. And then what I want to do is use a formula. And basically I want to use anything A5, but making sure within anything in that column. So we're going to remove the absolute from the 5, does not equal empty. So in that case, I want to just basically start out and bold it. So I'm going to put bold. Click OK, OK, and then we'll just apply it. Okay, so that I like that. So that way everything is 0. But what else do we want to do? Let's add some more rules on that so we can see. Well, I would like to give at least some lines for our normal expenses. So how do we do that? Our normal income and our normal expenses, some lines. So that's going to be anything where AB contains a value. So we're going to add a new rule. In this case, use a formula. In this case, we're going to use we're going to start in here. AB 6 does not equal empty, does not equal empty. In this case, I want to give it just probably, let's say, a top column and format that, and then we'll assign that a border. Let's go with a dotted on the top and click OK. I do need to set the applies to on that though. Click OK. In this case, I'll apply it, use the same applied range here, applies, and click apply. Okay, see how that looks. Now I also want to remove I don't really like in this dashboard, I don't like this particular grid line. So let's remove that so we can get a better look at it. Okay, so we need to update that. So we've got salaries, but I want it on fees too. So we just need to update that. So back in and then conditional formatting, and we'll manage those rules. Take a look at this. Take a look. All right, so we have here AB1. I don't want that. I wanted to make sure it's starting on 5. So edit that, and when we click the applies to, it changes automatically, which is okay. So now apply that and take a look at that. That's the way I want it. Okay, good. So I want to do some more things. I want to add in a solid line under or above the totals, right? If it's got total, I want to add that in. So how are we going to do that? Okay, well, anything with a total is going to be located in column AD, so we can use AD. So I'm going to set a new rule. This is use a formula. This one's going to be based on anything in AD5, right? If AD5 does not equal empty, then I want to put a line above that, right? So how do we do that? Does not equal empty. And then in this, I want to format that here, putting that line above here, clicking OK. And then also we do need to make sure if we check the applies to, let's change that to 40, keep it consistent with the others. All right, let's take a look at that. I like that. So now we've got it there. One more thing, I want to make sure that anything that says profit has more, maybe let's say put a gray background on it. So anything that we're going to focus on the text, right? So now I want to use the find formula. So I'm going to add a new rule into that. This time I'm going to use a formula, and we're going to use the find format because I want to know if the word total is found. If that word total is found anywhere, or let's just say profit, and we're going to use profit. So equals is error. I'm going to use is error. I'm going to look for find. I'm going to use the find command. And what am I going to find? I'm going to find the word profit. I want to look for that. If it is found, I want to know. So where is it going to be found? It can be found anywhere in any row starting with AA5. So click here. And any row, meaning, so we need to remove that absolute. Make sure that's A, there we go. Okay, so if it's found, right, then great. So If it's equal to false, I want to make sure equal to false. Only when that happens. So that means there's no error. If there's an error, nothing will happen. If there's no error, that means it's true, right? So format that, and here's what we're going to do. I'll give it a top and bottom border, and I will give it a fill of let's say that gray, and click OK. So that click OK, and now we'll just adjust the applies to and make sure it's working. Change this to 40, just as the others are. And then apply, and there we go. Click OK. So now I like that. Okay, so now we got great. That's exactly the way I want it. But how do I bring this inside here? I want to bring it in here. So that's all we need to do is write in the macro. So saving our work, and we'll continue with our macro and just a few more lines of code on this profit and loss. So we're done. Right now we're done with our transaction database. So we're done with that. So we're going to focus on the dashboard now. So with dashboard, everything else is going to come here. I want to do a few things. So first thing I want to do is I want to set the report range. Report range is going to be equal to, starting in AA4 dot range, AA4, that is where our title, that's where our header is, right? I want to start it right here, AA4, and I want to go all the way to AD and whatever the last row is. That's going to set our range, and then we can bring it over. So AA4 all the way through AD, and we notice that in the dashboard row and the dashboard row where our profit is, not dot value, that's just the range that we're going to set. Okay, so that's going to set our report range. Now all we need to do is copy that report range dot copy. I'm going to bring that over information. I want to put it directly. Where do I want to paste it? I want to bring it right in, let's say right here in F4. So we can paste it right there. I want to paste everything. I want to paste all the values, and I want to paste the column headers too. So we can use that. So once we've copied it, so we can dot range. F4 is where we're putting it. We're going to use paste special. Dot paste special. First thing I want to do is I want to paste all. So XL paste all. The next thing I want to do is I want to copy this in. I want to paste those column widths. Column widths are unique per report. So this one is going to be the column widths here. So now we've pasted that. And then just want to turn off the cut copy mode. Application dot cut copy mode equals false. Okay, that's it. That's all we need to do. And then what we want to do is, when do we want to run this report? So I'm going to copy this, and I want to run this report anytime the user selects on D3. So anytime the user selects on D. So that's a selection change event. So we need to write that up right now. So going back inside here, I'm going to go look in our worksheet here. Worksheet events is where we're going to put it inside the dashboard. Now there's nothing here. It's going to be based on selection change. So here is where, first thing what I want to do is if the user selects more than one cell, target count large is greater than 1, then exit sum. Assuming that they don't, what if they make, if not, they're going to make a selection. Where are we going to base it on? Going to be based on, that's fine, going to be based on what? D3 all the way and down. So let's just use D3 for now to D5 because we're only going to put in 3 reports. So D3 through D5 is nothing. So then what I want to do, then we're going to do something else. So then, okay, and if, so here's where we're going to write our code. So the first thing what I want to do is I want to actually take off screen updating because that is going to help from Flash. So application dot screen updating equals false. And make sure before we finish out the macro, we turn it back to true. If I can write false. Okay, so before we end up for that end if here, paste that in and make it true. Everything else will go in between there. But the first thing I want to do is I want to clear out any reports. I want to run a macro that's going to clear out all the information. Before we determine what report to run, I want to run that macro. So which macro? And let's clear it out. So basically from F all the way through Z or whatever, however long we want to make it, I want to clear everything out that might be there. And then that includes all the formats as well. And I want to use that in a macro. So we can write that macro under our miscellaneous here. So I've got a dashboard here, miscellaneous module here. And here's where we can write out. We change them. So this is the one I want to write, clear macro. So what is the range? So first thing is we're going to do is dashboard. It's a very simple macro, dashboard dot range. In this case, F4 through Z, and then just use a large number in case we have a lot of data. Dot clear. Remember, we're using clear. I want to clear all the formats, not clear contents. But I also want to clear some information. This is for the formats. But I also want to clear out. Also, I want to know any of these want to clear these out too from B3 to B5. These are going to come in handy on the report card. So B3, this is our selected report number, selected student. B3 through B5, I just want to clear the contents of those. So we can write that up here. Dashboard dot range B3 through B5 dot clear content. Okay, so that's going to clear out the those fields that we need. And then also what I want to do is I'll create some shapes, but those shapes are only going to be used for report cards, so we'll focus on that. I'll write that in a little bit later, but we don't need that now. So that's it for the macro for now. We'll add one more line of code later. So I'm just going to copy that, and we're going to go back into the dashboards here, and I'm going to then, let's pull it up here, and then I'm going to paste that in here. So clear report range. So now how do we know which report to run? So let's get that report back to where we had. I want to copy that, the dashboard reports, that's the one we've created. I just want to copy that macro name. That's the one I want to use, but only if they select a specific row, right? Only if they're selecting only if they're selecting row 3, right? So how do we do that? So first thing what I want to do is I want to add in the row that they've selected, and then I want to know. So back into the dashboard here, first thing I'm going to do is just put in the row. I want to take that row and place it somewhere. And where do I want to place it? Using conditional formatting, I want to place it inside B3 here. So how do we do that? But it's actually be the row minus, so it's going to be the row, in this case 3, but I want to put the report number, so it's going to be -2. Target row -2. So take care of that. Range B3 dot value equals target dot row -2. Set report number. If the target dot row equals 3, then paste it in, run P and L. And as we write the two other reports, we'll just add to that here and here. Okay, saving our work, and now we're going to run it. Take a look at that. Fix this here, AD in the dashboard row. Quotations are in the wrong spot there. That doesn't help. Okay, continuing on, let's take a look at that. Okay, that looks pretty good. Let's bring this down. We don't need this big. Okay, I like that. That looks very, very good. Now, what I also want to do is I want to automatically update this report when I change this. So that's inside here. So that's based on this report number. So basically, when I change a term, I also want this to refresh. So let's write that up inside the code right now based on that. So inside dashboard miscellaneous, here, term change, right? If dot range B3 dot value equals 1, then refresh, run the report. So this one, I want to run this one here, right here. This is the macro I want to run, but only if the dashboard report number is 1. So close this out, paste this in here. There we go. So now it's going to run, and we can check when there's no data, saving that. So here we go. Let's take a look here. Now, when we change the term here, it's going to run here. Okay, we need to clear that out. The first thing you know, when we change the terms, it's good, but we need to clear out whatever's there. So let's just do that right now. I want to make sure that we clear everything out. So all we need to do is run the macro. When we change the term, I need to run the macro that's going to clear that. What macro is that? That's this macro right here, clearing the reports. Just clear the reports. Placing that down here before we rerun that. So changing the term here clears it out. Changing the term here clears it out, and here. But you see, when we cleared out the report number, that's not going to help us. So all we need to do is, all we really need to do is just use this line of code. We don't need this. So let's update that. In other words, we only want to clear the data, not the report number. So yeah, that's probably going to work better. Okay, so doing this, and then this one here. Okay, let's take a look at it now. Nothing here, no data. Good, I like that. Here, data, perfect. All right, the only thing I want to do is I want to select something else. I want to select, let's say, F4 at the end of the report, or all of them. So inside our dashboard right here, I want to select another cell. So right here, range F3 dot select. And what that's going to do is so that it's not highlighted everything. So now when I select this, let's just refresh the term here. Here, okay, good. So that's not going to work. It'll work perfect. So let's do F4. Let's do F4. And I want to do the same thing when we change the terms. So F4 select, and also the same when we change the terms. I also want to do this exactly the same thing on term change. Here, put that down here. So now it'll work both on term change when we change the term. I don't want everything selected. term 3, and term 2. Okay, great. Our profit and loss is done. Let's do the student attendance and then the report cards. Okay, so how are we going to do that? Well, it's just a little bit of a macro. The attendance is relatively easy. The attendance is going to be based on this database here. So I'm going to drag the attendance database over here so it's close to the dashboard. And also, so what I want to do is again run a criteria based on certain attendance. All of our attendance is going to come in here. The status of that attendance is here. And I want to do it again based on the lesson date and the class ID. So we have some criteria here. We have the lesson date based on those 2 days, again, from the date and 2 dates. So I want to run, again, another advanced filter based on this lesson date. So all the lessons within that date range. Then what I wanted to get is I want to get those unique students. The results of that is going to be the student name and the student ID. And I want to put that right here. Then what I want to do is I want to bring a formula, and that formula is going to be located right here. And I want to bring that formula all the way down here so that I know how many total present in that time, how many total absent, or how many total sick. Now, if you notice there's a formula here, all we're doing is linking this directly to the admin screen. So here inside the admin screen, if you see here, we have specific, let's take a look at classes and lessons here. So if I add test here, I want that automatically, that attendance status to come up. So our attendances are dynamic. As we add attendance, here we have the test here. So it's just linked there. And all we did was use indirect based on this row number. This is the row number. Notice I put these row number 9, row number 10, row number 11, 13. It's the same as these row numbers here. 9, 10, 11, and all the way 13. So that's how we do it dynamically. So that means anytime I want to count all the attendance status based on the data, based on that information. So inside the dashboard here, I want to display all those here along with the column. And I also want to have that information come through here. So bringing it all the way down. But we need a formula. I need to count how many of those student names. But first, what we want to do, let's put some data in here before we put those formulas in here. So we can use an advanced filter for that. Then I'm going to have all this information come over. So I want the student name, student ID, and all this brought into this. So it's going to look something like this here inside our dashboard. So I'm going to copy this here. I'm going to place it inside our dashboard, just the values here. We're going to start it out. In this case, we're going to start out column BA. So we're going to shrink everything else down here, all the way down here, because we're not going to use those. We're just going to bring it. So in the next course report is going to be on CA. So BA is where it's going to put. I'm going to put one report header here, and then down here a subheader. So I'm going to paste in those values here. You can have the student name and the student ID, and then of course each individual here, and then I want a title here based on that. So I want student attendance. So I'm going to copy this title here. I'm just going to copy this one here, and then we're going to make the update. So this is what I want to copy. I'm going to paste it directly here, and then I'm going to call this, in this case it's going to be called student attendance. So student attendance from, okay, so then of course we're going to send it out across the selection. So I'm going to go all the way, in this case, all the way to probably, how many are there? Let's take a look here. All the way to BQ. So I'm going to format these all the way to BQ here. That's what we want here. And I'll give that a format, and then also we want a sub format. So actually our main format here, cell styles here, the table title. Then I want a subtitle, a sub format here. We have a cell style here for our sub, and we're going to use that so it's consistent. And then I'm going to drag this over, and I'm going to center it across the selection. That's the alignment that I want here, center across selection. Click OK. Now what we're going to do is we're going to have VBA bring this across here. Our student names are going to appear here, our student IDs, and then the total number of absent, sick, or whatever we want, putting that down here. Okay, so that's how it's going to work, saving our work. And then, of course, once we have all the data, we're going to bring it into from our staging area and bring it into our, the columns will be automated as well. All right, so let's do that right now. Let's write up some macros to help us with that. All right, it's going to be based on this attendance database. So let's get that first part of the macro written. So it's going to be a very, very short macro. It's relatively easy. The formulas do all the hard work for us. So inside our main macro here, this is the one we want to go in through dashboard reports here. Now we're focused on the sub attendance report. And the first thing we want to do again is clear any information from our current dashboard. So what I want to do is, in fact, I'm also going to clear this header row because I'm going to bring this in. The reason is because these are variable, right? These could change as we change in our admin. So I want to make sure, I don't think that's the right one here. Let me just update that. The cell style should be this one here. Yeah, that's the one I want. So these are going to change based on that. So how do we do that? Well, the best way to do that is just to start everything out starting with BA5 all the way through BQ and down. So inside our macro, I'm going to do just that. Dashboard, .range, BA5, all the way through BQ, and then large row, 99, .clear the contents, .clear contents, clear existing report data. Can't type this morning. Okay, continuing on. Now we're going to focus primarily on the attendance database with attendance database. Make sure we have the right, okay, that's the right name. Now, again, I want to clear the contents in this case of any prior results. So inside the attendance database here, I'm going to clear out starting with O3 all the way through P. I'm bringing those O3 all the way through P and down. So let's clear that out. .range, O3 through P9999, clearing those out. And then also what I want to do is M4. I want to keep our formulas intact. I want to put the formulas here. So what I want to do is keep those formulas here, but then bring them down as we need them and then clear them out. That keeps our workbook light. So from Q4 all the way through AE, I'm going to clear out those two as well. So Q4 through AE. Q4 through AE, clearing that range out too. Okay, so .clear contents. Clear prior results. Now that we have done that, we'll determine the last row is going to be equal to. Same thing in this case. We're going to determine the last row based on column A. And if the last row is less than 3, right, our first row starts in row 3 here. So if the last row is less than 3, we need to exit out of the sub. So we can do that. If the last row is less than 3, then exit sub. So now that we know that we have data, we can continue on. I want to run our advanced filter. So just like we do so often, run that advanced filter. This time it's going to be based on A2 all the way through J, A2 through J. Keeping that up. And then we're going to run our criteria is going to be based on here, L2 through M3. So we can run that. Here, L, A2 all the way through J. Our criteria is going to be based on L2 through L3, L2 through L3. Our results are going to come where? Our results, I only want the student name and the student ID, so that's going to be O and P. O2 through P2. That's it. So that's going to get our results. So let's run that now and see what we get. Let's fix that out, not AP. P2. Running that. Okay, good. So we've got it here. That's what I like, student IDs and names. So now what we want to do is we want to focus on some formulas based on this, right? So how do we do that? So basically what I want to do is I want to count how many present for this student ID in this table based on these dates from to. Remember, these dates are based on our dashboard. So it has to be between these 2 days, between 419 and 625. That's what I want to count. So it's going to use a COUNTIF formula. So what is that formula? It's going to be based on multiple criteria. So equals COUNTIF's multiple criteria. And what's the first criteria? The first one is going to be the student ID, right? It has to be equal. Attendance can be based on that. Student ID is going to be based on what? This particular ID right here. In P3, I want to keep that column. I want to keep column. It's going to be dynamic for rows. So I'm going to keep the column P. Column P is always going to be there, but the rows can change based on all the students. So that's the first criteria. What is the second criteria? It's going to be the status. I want to know what status, the attendance status. Here, this one is going to be based on what? Based on the status located right here. This status. Again, in this case, our column is going to be relative, but our row is going to be fixed. So we want to make sure that our row is fixed. So that's it. So that's going to be based on that. Now, what's our next? We're going to base it on the date, the attendance lesson date, the attendance lesson date. It's going to have to be, there's two criteria. It's going to have to be greater than or equal to the from date and the from date. And it's also going to have to be less than or equal to to date. Attendance lesson date here is going to have to be less than or equal the to date and the to date. So there we go. So that's the to date. And perfect. So that's all we need to do. Again, so we want a student ID, making sure whatever's in the relative row and column P. We want the attendance status in the relative column and the specific row of row 2, we want the attendance lesson date of greater than or equal to from date and the attendance lesson date than less than or equal to to date, and hit enter. So now we've got that. So now what I want to do is drag that over here, all the way over here, and that's perfect. So one absent, one sick, and as we drag, now we can drag that down, but we can also let VBA copy these formulas and bring them down for all the students, because we only want to bring the formula down for whatever students we have. And we can do that within VBA. So let's write that in the code now that we have our formulas set up. So inside that, first of all, I want to determine the last result row. So the last result row is going to be equal to, based on whatever is in O or P, either one, equals XLR, okay, copy that, and it's going to be based, we'll use P because I like those fixed, and that's going to determine if for some reason our last results row is less than, let's get rid of that extra dot, less than 3 in this case, we can't move on. So we can do this. This case, I'm going to copy this and just change out the variable on here, last result row. Okay, so making sure that we actually have results. Now that we know we have results, what we want to do is then we can copy those formulas down there. So how are we going to do that? It's going to be a simple formula to formula, or in this case, copy and paste. So we can set our range. What is our range? Our range is dot range Q3 all the way through AE3, Q3 through AE3. That is our range that we're going to copy. And then we're going to paste special paste formula, copy. And then we're going to use paste special paste formula, dot range, Q, pasting it into Q4, Q4 through AE, and the last results row. And the last result row, dot paste special, and then paste those formulas. So paste formula is going to be down here, all the way down here. Okay, so you can't see it, it's off the screen. Paste formulas. So we're pasting the formulas, and then of course, application dot cut copy mode, get rid of that, equals false. We don't no longer need that. Okay, so after that cut copy mode, so we've copied all the formulas. Now we're ready to bring it inside the dashboard. So we have all of our data right here. Now I'm ready to bring it into data, but I want to include this one. Remember, we got some dynamic. I want to make sure to include O2. So inside our dashboard, we're simply going to create one that says BA5 all the way through BQ, and the last results row starting, if this one starts in 5 and this one starts in row 3, we need to compensate 2 of them. So we can do that with one line of code. So starting with dashboard dot range BA5 through BQ, and the last result row plus 2 dot value equals dot range O3 through AE, and the last result row. And the last result row. Bring over data. Bring over data. Okay, so now we've brought it over into the dashboard. We're good to go. So let's end with, that's it for our attendance database. Everything else is going to be with the dashboard. So with dashboard. Now we can move into that. So what do we want to do again? I want to set the report range. What is that report range going to be? It's going to be based on here, starting with BA4 all the way through BQ, and the last result row plus 2. Okay, so let's go ahead and add that into the code right now. Dot range, so we're going to set the report range is going to be equal to dot range BA4 through BQ, and the last result, always based on the last result row plus 2, just as we did before, plus 2. Okay, so now we've got that, and we can continue on. So all we need to do is just copy it. It's not dot value, it's just a range. So now we're just going to copy the range, just as we did before. We did it almost exactly, so all we need to do is just copy this, what we've done before. Nothing else is going to change on that, and just paste it right down here. So that's it. Let's continue on and then copy that. Okay, saving our work, and we want to, when do we want to run this report? I want to run this report when they select that specific, in 2 instances, when they change the date range or when they select on that. So those are the 2 instances we're going to run this report. So let's add that macro to those 2 instances. The first of which is inside the dashboard on screen when doing on the selection change right here. So selection change, in this case, pasting that, and we just need to copy this, paste it down there, and change it to 4. If the target row equals 4, then we're going to run the attendance. Run attendance report. So all we need to do is just copy this here, then put a space in there, and copy this. Now what I want to do is run this based on when they change the term exactly. So we can actually just copy this and then update the term. When the term changes, we also want to run it. That's in the dashboard miscellaneous. Here's where we want to run it here. This case, if dot range B3 equals 4, you can imagine, equals 4, then we're going to run it. Then run the dashboard report. Then run this. Put the then in. Okay, good. So now we can run it both on the, this should be 2, not 4, row 4, this report number 2. Okay, so now when we click on the student attendance, let's take a look at that. I like that. We just need to bring it out more so that we can have that, make it look better here. So we can bring that, add in this here, and then add in the colors here. We need to update the color. That's looking good. Alrighty, let's take a look at that. I like that, the way it looks. Now we've got our attendance. The only thing what we need to do is we need to add some conditional formatting in here so it looks it up a little bit better. And we added inside here. So let's highlight all of these and go all the way down and add some conditional formatting. I'm going to add at least probably 2 rules in here, one for both odd and even based on whether there's data. So it's going to be an and. So conditional formatting, I'm going to go into manage rules. Then I'm going to click new rule. And the first rule is going to be based on and. So equals, and what are the 2 conditions? One, there has to be a value in BA and 6, but not, it could be dynamic based on any row. Does not equal empty. And the other one is going to be based on odd or even row. So I'm going to use automate that. It's going to, the first one's going to be based on the even row. And based on the even row, I want to color it. In this case, let's color it a gray. So I'm going to format that and also give it some borders. I'll give it this lighter gray color, and I'll put a border all the way around it. Click OK. Now I'm going to copy this because I want to do almost similar for the odd rows. Click OK. And then, oh, let's fix the error there. One more quotation there. OK. Click OK. And then new rule, and then I'll have to fix it. Paste that in, also fixing that quotation mark here. This one, and then make sure this is for the odd row. So this is going to be 1. Formatting this, I'll keep this white, but I'll change the border here. Clicking OK and click OK, and then click apply. There we go. I like that. Just update this column. I'm going to have to, this column is going to have to be, but we got our headers wrong. We need to include the headers. Remember, the header's not quite right. So let's update that from there. So we want to make sure the headers come all the way in from. So back into the attendance database, I want to bring these are the headers in. So starting with O2 all the way down. So let's update that inside the code. So closing this one out, must come from O2 here. Close this one out here. This is what I want to do. So BA4 right here, O2, it's got to equal O2, got to equal those headers. Okay, so let's run that here and take a look at that here inside the dashboard here. There we go. Now we've got those headers correct. Now we've got everything. We've got the conditional formatting correct, just the way I like it. Now we know how many times they're present or absent or whatever. Perfect. We got the student ID here. Nice. I like that, just the way it looks. Okay, great. Our last one is the report cards. Now I want to run the report cards. Let's make sure that this one updates on the term. Perfect. That looks good. So nothing, no data in term. Perfect. Okay, so that's looking good. Last one is the report cards. What I want to do with the report cards, I want to be able to print those report cards. So I'm going to have 2 buttons for printing. And I do have one in the scheduling. Let's copy a button here that I've got here. The print button, we don't need to do this. So I'm just going to copy this here and this here, and I'm going to copy that. I'm going to bring that inside the dashboard here. This one, and then I want 2 buttons. Basically, instead of I want to print, the first one I want to do is I just want to print a selected report card, and the other one is I want to print all report cards. So we want to have 2 buttons based on either one so the user can choose which one they want to do. So let's write some macros for that right now. So the first one is going to be print selected report card, and then we'll increase that up, and we'll give that a better width here. Formatting is probably about 2 inches there. Okay, that looks good. And I want to basically duplicate this. And then, so I'm just going to duplicate this here. And there's going to be all report cards. So this one's going to be all report cards. So we're going to loop through all the students. And this one we'll set it to about 1.7 here. Okay, so I like that. And we'll group these. I only want to display these for the right report, right? So I want to group this, all these here, group them together, and we'll call this report card group. And of course, when we group something, we need to make sure that we're not sizing that. So inside the properties, move but don't size. Okay, close that. Okay, so we only want to display this group for a single report. So I'm going to copy this, and initially we're going to hide it. So back inside our miscellaneous, this is what we wanted to do. Dashboard. I'm going to hide it for all the reports and then show it for, in this case, dot shapes, this shape, dot visible equals MSO false. So we're going to initially hide it, and then inside our dashboard report, we're going to show it. So that's the report. It's relatively easy. So let's go ahead and do that. Dashboard reports. This is the one I want to show it here, but I want to do it. So the first thing what we want to do is I want to display it. So equals, let's update that, equals MSO true. Okay, so we're showing that, going to show that just for that report, not the minus. Let's get rid of that. So this is going to be 4 different macros, but there are 3 different macros. Now, the first one's simply going to display all of our data here. So let's clear it out. It's going to display what I'd like is like a list of students and then in a report card here. So then what I want to do is I want the user to be able to select on a specific student, as you saw there in the preview initial. Then I want that report card data to show up based on the selected student. Then I want to give them the choice. They can print that single report card or they can print all report cards. So the first thing we want to do is just in our staging area, again, design that screen. So we're going to go all the way to, again, starting with CA here, and we're going to design that. So I'm going to bring these, and we'll design that. It's relatively simple. We'll keep it simple today. So what I want to do is basically have the student name and the student ID. So, and then a header. So let's go ahead and put that. I'm going to copy this header here. In fact, we can probably copy both of those, and then we'll bring it into CA, and then we'll make the updates accordingly. So CA4 is where we're going to start it out, pasting that. So the first thing is I want to show report cards from. Change this text to report cards from and everything else. And then the next thing I want to have the student name. That's good, the student name and the student ID. So it's fine the way it is here, so we can just copy this too because we're using the same. So I want to list out the student name and the student ID here. So, all right, so we'll expand this a little bit. Not that far because we don't need that, but we'll merge and center this. So this one's going to go all the way over. We'll probably use a certain amount of columns because I want to display the report card. So we're going to go all the way to CI here, all the way to CI. So this is what I'm going to format to our main title. Then I'm going to stretch this, basically going to center across the selection with this one here. You get it by now. Click OK. So I want to have the student name, the student ID. I want to have one space here, and then I want to have the report card, some information here. So I want to also have a dynamic header based on the term. So it's going to be equals quotation report card and then dash. And then what are we going to, I want to have the term name. When we have that term, call it term. And then I want to have the term name space. And then where's that term name? Remember, we placed that term name already here. We placed it here. So we can click on that. Okay, so now we have, so our report card is going to be here. All the information in the report card. We'll just call it report card. It's going to be a single report card. Report card. And we'll give that some, let's say I'm also going to give that this one. And I also want to center this one across selection because this is going to be our report card. So center across selection. Okay, so inside here, I want to have the student name inside that report card, and then I'm going to put that student name here, whatever that selected student name will be located in CE6. After that, I want to have the student ID, and then after that, I want to have the final score, final. All right, perfect. And then I want to have some headers here. So, and then I want to have a table here of all of the classes that they took. So here's going to be called the class name. Next up, I want the teacher, who taught that class. I also want the subject of the class. And next up, I want to have the dates from and then to, and then I want to have the score, the average score of all the tests or quizzes or exams inside that for that specific class. All right, that's good enough. Let's give that the bold font and put borders all the way around it. And then these, we're going to give it a specific color, that gray color that we're going to use that for. All right, I like that. So final score here, we can keep those. Center these one. These are going to be our headers. So all of our specific classes, all of the classes that's been enrolled in for that specific period. I say the word specific way too much. I know that. Okay, so let's do a border, outside borders just on here. That's what I want to do. Outside borders on here and here. Giving the black column. Okay, good. I like that. That looks nice. That's going to, a little bit more space for the name. That's all we need to do. So then we're going to have a table down here. As we select the student names, I want all their classes to load up. I want their name and everything else to appear here. Good. So how are we going to do that? Well, again, it's going to be based on the attendance database. This database has all the information we want. It has the scores, we have the classes, class ID, the lesson. It has everything we need. So we can use this in an advanced filter based on those dates here. So I've got it here to help us out. Report card criteria. I want to base it on the lesson dates. I want to get all of the students inside that, based on that. Then what I want to do when I select a student, we don't need this here. That's from the sample, so I don't need that link here. Get rid of that formula. So it's going to be based on dashboard B5. B5 is where we're going to place it on. Put that. All right, good. So if there's a student ID in B5 of the dashboard, that's when we select a student. This is where this is going to come in. Selected student row is going to be here. The ID that they've selected is going to be located in B5. So if I select one, I want that automatically to come in the attendance database. I want this to be here. So we'll put the student name in here and the student ID, and the results are going to come here. So the student ID is going to be here. So this is then what we have is our criteria based on a selected student. Then I want all of the classes to come here. I want all the classes that student was enrolled in based on those dates. Then we're going to have some header information here to have all that. What header information we're going to have here? It's the same as we placed inside this dashboard. Let's bring that over here. It is right here. This is the header information, class name all the way here. So I'm going to copy this here, and then I'm going to paste that inside there. So inside here, all we need to do is in attendance data is paste that in here. So the formula, so then we have formulas that are going to bring in all the class name based on these class IDs. I can bring in the class name. I can bring in the teacher, subject, from, to, and all of that. Then what I want to do is get an average score. So we can do that with some basic formulas. We've been over these formulas before. So basically we're going to class name index based on this class IDs. So if I have class ID here, everything's going to save. So all we need to do is put in the class IDs, take these formulas and bring them down here based on this. So we have, again, I've already filled this in because they're relatively simple. The teacher based on the match of that class ID. We're going to have the subject based on that class subject. The from due, it's going to be based on the class from date, and then the class to date. And then I want an average score, and I'll go over this formula with you in just a moment. But let's start bringing in this. What I need is the first thing what I want to do is I want to know all the students that had classes between these lesson dates. So all those students in a unique list. So let's write that up right now inside our macro. And that's going to be this macro called display students. We want to display those students. The first thing we want to do with this macro, again, is clear any prior results inside the dashboard. So starting here inside the dashboard, again, CA6 all the way through CB99, I want to clear all those. So let's do that right now inside the macro. So dashboard dot range CA6 through CB9999 dot, let's put another 9 in there, dot clear contents. Clear existing students. But I also want to do more than that. I want to clear the classes if there's been any classes starting here all the way in CD8 through CI. I want to clear any of the class information for that. So let's do that also. Add in that. Comma CD8, let's bring this up here, CD8 all the way through CI, clearing that out. 8 through CI999, clearing those contents, clear existing students, and class details. Okay, so once we have that, we can then focus on the attendance database. So with attendance database, first thing I want to do is clearing any prior results inside our attendance database. Also AM through AN, starting there, and also here, I want to clear out anything else here too. So we can do that with just this line of code. Dot range, AM3 through AN, and then 999, bring it out. Also, what I want to do is AP4 through AV, AP4 through AV in a large row. Going to clear out those contents. So that's clear contents, clear prior results. Once we have that, we can then run our advanced filters. So of course, it's going to be based on the last row, which we've already defined as a variable, and it's going to be based on L. So we're going to ready to run if the last row is less than 3. I think I had that automated. I can't remember the shortcut. Last row is less than 3, then exit the sub. So assuming we have data moving on, running our advanced filter, we've been over this a lot of times in this series. So This is it. Okay, now we're going to run our advanced filter. And here our advanced filter is going to be basically all I want to really need is the student names and the student IDs in here. So we really only need to run it to A2 through AD because that's all we're going to need. But if you're going to add more later, you can run it all the way to the last, but it's only necessary until you get to them. So A2 through J, in this case, I'll just put all of them in case we know. A2 through J, make sure our named variable is correct, last row. Our criteria in this case, I only want it based on those lesson dates. For now, only those lesson dates. So those are located, where are they located? All the way over here. I'm going to keep these. AI through AJ. We're not running one based on the student. I don't want that now. Just all the students. AI through AJ. AI2 through AJ3. AI2 through AJ3. That's sufficient for now. And then those results, where those results are going to come in, AM and AN. AM through AN. That's our results we're bringing there. Now what we want to do is we want to make sure that we actually have results row. So again, last result row is going to be equal to, in this case, we're going to focus on our student ID, which is in AN. Making sure that we have results for last results. If the last results row is less than 3, then exit the sub. Doing the same thing here, but just changing the variable here, pasting it here, last result row. Okay, so now we know we have data and we can continue on. So what are we going to do with that data? Well, I'm going to bring it inside the dashboard. So I'm going to bring it right in here. So CA6 through CB and down. That's what we're going to, so dashboard, range CA6 through CB. We're starting off in 6 and the last result row plus 3, where we're starting in 3 in the result, plus 3 dot value is equal to dot range AM3 through AN and the last results row. All right, so now we have that. We've brought it over everything. So that's it as far as the attendance database. Now we're going to focus on the dashboard. So pretty much all we need to do is just copy this here. We're focused on that, pasting that in here. We can bring this here and bring this with all dot shapes. Okay, good. So bringing that shape in here. But we're going to set the report range. We need to update this report range. What is it going to be? Our report range, I want basically all of starting with CA4 all the way through CI and down. So C, because we're just bringing over CA4 through CI, and we can just use a large row in this case, CI, and clearing that out. This is going to be a fixed range, but it's going to be a large row. That's fine. Copy that, paste. Perfect. Okay, and then making sure that those things apply. That's it for this part of the macro. So saving that. Again, now all we need to do is just copy this and add this into the 2 instances where we want it. The first one, of course, being on the dashboard screen here based on target row equal 5. So if target dot row equals 5, we do need to add some conditional formatting in there, then run this report. Run display students. Okay, so let's just make sure it's working. And then also, again, might as well do it also on this then. And then of course, our term change, which is located in the miscellaneous here. Dashboard miscellaneous, our term change here, adding it here too. If dot range B3 dot value equals 3, then we're going to run that also. Okay, so running it on term change, saving our work here. And let's see if we've got any issues here and we can fix them accordingly. Report cards, okay, looks good. We need to update this. We need to make sure that it is fixed. Is it absolute, right? So B7 is not going to change. That looks fine. All right, running it again. That looks good. Okay, conditional formatting is needed here and it's needed here. So that's important. Those 2 things are needed. Everything else looks good. Let's stop moving. Everything else looks good. So the idea is when I select a student, I want all this information to fill in. Then they can either say, this is what I want. Here's our buttons that appeared here automatically for this report only. So that's what we're going to do. So let's add some conditional formatting, relatively easy in here. In fact, I can just copy this conditional formatting that's already here and paste it right in here, and then update the code. So what we're going to do is just go back in there and then update the rules on that. Manage those rules, the 2 rules that we copied over. So we like this this is going to change to CA6, right? CA6. That's good. Click OK. And then it applies to, it's going to be larger range here, all the way down here. Just change it to 999. And then click apply and make sure this doesn't change. Okay, we're going to do the same thing here. In this case, CA6 here. Click OK. The applies to, we're going to keep this, change it to here, apply that. Okay, good. I like that there. So now we've got that. And I'm going to do the same thing for here. I want also the same thing. So I'm going to copy that, paste it down here. Then conditional formatting, manage rules. We're doing exactly the same thing, just updating the conditional formatting. This case, we're going to focus on CD8. So CD8, click OK. And then the applies to in this case is going to be all of these here, all the way down here, and then up to a large row here. Okay, click apply, making sure that doesn't change. Again, doing the same thing here, CD8, click OK. And then copy the applies to here, paste it down here, and then click apply. Okay, good. I like that. Click OK. But in actuality, what we want to do is probably, and that should be fine. It should be sufficient for now. I like that. As soon as we add data here, right, the conditional format, perfect. That's what I want. That'll look nice. I like it. Okay, deleting the data. All right, saving our work. So now we've got our conditional formatting, making sure when we bring it over, our conditional formatting is now brought over. Now all we need to do is add one. I want to add one more rule on conditional formatting. When I select a row, I want that selected row to highlight. Right? So we have selected student row here, B4. So let's add one row, but we need to add it to our original here. So highlighting that, conditional formatting, manage rules here, new rule, in this case, formula, in this case, B4 equals, selecting on B4 is going to equal to the row. E4 equals the row. When that happens, then I want to format that. What kind of format do I want? I want to do a fill. We'll use this color here. I want the font of bold, and I want it to set it to white. Clicking OK, and click OK. So now when I bring that over, CA, that looks good. Let's take a look at that. So now when I run the report again, and then I change the row for a selected row, let's say 8, then that row now is we selected. So now when I select something on this report, I want that row to show up here. And I also want the student ID, so we can write that here, writing that code. Okay, so let's write up the macro so that we know when we select that. So that's going to be on selection chain. So we can write that up inside our dashboard, adding on to that selection chain. So here inside the dashboard, we've already got some selection chains, but this is going to be based on a new range, based on two conditions. One, they must select between F6 and G and down. Also, I want to make sure that the report number that they select has to be report number 3. This is only for report number 3. And I also want to make sure that there's a value in F. So we're going to check on those. So starting in selection change F6 through G. So here under selection change, if not, selection change F6 through G and down, F6 through G, nothing, and range B3 dot value equals 3. We want to make sure it is actually that specific report. And also I want to make sure, right, we want to make sure that it is the right report number, only on that. And I want to make sure that F contains a value. And range F and the target dot row dot value does not equal empty. Then we're going to do something. So what are we then, adding the then, what are we going to do? Well, then I want to do a few things. I want to put that row, that target row inside B4. So range B4 dot value equals the target row. I also want to put the student ID inside B5. Remember, I want that student ID. It's going to come from G and whatever the target row is. So let's do that now. Range B5 dot value equals range G and the target dot row dot value, student ID. All right, I like that. So I want to make sure that, and then we'll just check on that. Okay, it looks good. Now it's changing over. So now what we can do is if we know what student ID, we know the name, all I need to do is start filling in this information. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in those formulas and fill it here. So if I put it here, when we bring over, the formula is going to be brought over too. So all I need to do is add in that formula. So we can add it in here. Equals if error, in case there's no error, let's add that in. Equals if error, we're going to use an index. I want to index, what am I going to index? I'm indexing that student name. So student name here. And then I want to index based on the row. We're going to use a match. We're going to match it on based on the student ID. Where's that student ID located? It is located right here inside B5. Now that we have the student ID, I am going to actually make sure that that is absolute using F4. Then what I'm going to do is student ID. That's what we're looking at. Exact match. first column, right? One column. If there's an error, use empty. Okay, so that's going to bring over here. But what about now? We want to do is I'm going to add in that student ID here. That should be student ID. I want to put that student ID. Of course, that's going to be located right in just B5, right? So we notice that B5 and make sure that that's absolute. Student ID is going to be there. So, and then if we're making absolute because when we bring it over, we need to make sure it doesn't change. And I also want to know the final score, right? How are we going to use that? Well, it's going to be basically all the scores down here based on the average value. So let's write that in there. Equals, if error, in case that, going to use, but I also want to round it. I don't want more decimals than let's say 1 or 2. It's fine. So I'm going to use the average. Going to do the average of what? We're going to use the average of basically whatever's located in all the way down here, starting here, and then just go all the way down to a large number. So let's just say there's 25 classes or whatever. It's more than enough. So we're going to get the average of that. And I also want to know the number of digits. 1 will do 1, and if there's an error, we'll just do empty. Okay, so I like that. So that way, as the scores appear here, so does this. So all I need to do is select on a specific student and have that appear here. So if I select on it, but when we load it, now those formulas are going to load. So if I reload it, and now we select on it, now we see that it's automatically here. So we've got the student ID here. I like that. Let's bring this over here on the left here. And then I'm going to right justify this, this, and this, right? Make sure that those are right justified. Okay. Perfect. So we've got the student spelled out right. We've got a letter there. Student ID here. And the final score, the student name. So now all we need to do is run a macro that loads the classes when we select a specific student. Everything else is looking good. Saving our work. So we're going to run that macro right now. When we select a student, I want to know all the classes. And again, that's going to come directly from this. But in this case, we now have our student ID. Remember, as it's based on B5. So now I can run a macro that's going to load all of the class IDs based on this student ID here. So we can do that with just a little bit of a code. So let's write in here. And that's going to be right inside here. Not here, not in term change. We're going to locate that. That's display student. So what I want to do is I want to generate report card, generate the selected. So we can do that with just a little bit of code. So how do we do that? Well, that's right here. Inside, first what we want to do is always clear out any previous information here. So I want to clear out everything from I8 all the way through N and down inside the dashboard. So dashboard dot range I8 through N and then a large number, just clear out those contents. Dot clear contents. Okay, next up, we're going to focus with the attendance database, just as we did before, attendance database. And we also, very, very similar, so we can just copy this because we did almost everything else. I'm just going to copy this here, all the way here, and then we can just make the adjustments here because it's very, very similar, but we do have some difference. So the first thing, I want to clear the prior results inside our attendance database. So what are those prior results? In this case, I really want to focus on here, prior results, AP all the way through AP4 through AV. So those are ones where I want to clear out AP4. So just that in this case. So clearing this out. Next up, the last row is going to remain consistent. If last row AJ2, we'll bring it all the way through J, and that's fine. In this case, our criteria is going to be all the way to AK3 because we want to include that student ID. Our results are going to come. I only want the class IDs, right? I only want to bring in the class IDs. Our formulas will take care of everything else. So just the class ID, which is located in AP3, that's all I want to bring over. So AP3 is where it is. AP3 is where we want the results to show up. That's it. So our last results row is going to be located in this case on AP. That's where our last results row. If the last results row in this case is less than 4, then we know that there's no classes. So 4, we can exit the sub out. Assuming that we do have data, we can then continue on. Then what I want to do is I want to take these formulas and I want to bring them all the way down based on however many classes we have. So we can do that. If our first one's based on this, all we need to do is use a formula to formula. So we can do that with this. So saying, let's say dot range AQ4, so our first row, AQ4 through AV, and our last results row, last result row dot formula, not value, dot formula equals, in this case, AQ2 through AV2 equals dot range AQ2, also the formulas, 2 through AV2. 2. Also the formulas. Capitalize this, make it look a little bit better properly. Okay, so we have that. Now it's not the formula, so it's going to bring down all of our formulas. That's going to bring down the classes, names, and also going to bring down the scores. So once we have that, we can then bring that over into the dashboard. So very, very simple, just as we did before. In this case here, now let's go ahead and go, in this case, I say that a lot too. All right, so CD8 through CI, CD8 through CI. That's where we're going to bring, that's our destination. So dashboard, dot range, CD8, but maybe we don't need to bring it. We could just bring it into the original destination. Why don't we just do that, right? We don't need to bring it into our staging area. We can, our conditional formatting's also been over, so we can bring it directly into I8 through N. That's fine too. So let's do that. Dot range, I8 through N, and what? The last result row plus what? Well, if our results are starting in 4 and they're going into 8, so we need to add 4 to compensate for that. Dot value equals dot range AQ4 through AV. AQ4 through AV, and the last results row, and the last result row. It's going to bring over class data. Okay, I like that. To get an and sign here, we need that and. Okay, that looks pretty good. I like that. And when do we want to run this macro? Well, I want to run this specific macro when I select anything. When I select, run that selection change, that's when I want to run it. So let's add that macro to the selection change event here inside the dashboard. Right here, that selection change event, once we brought over that, let's run the macro here. Can clean this up a little bit and take a look at this. Let's take a look at it. Fix this one here. Not A3, right? Obviously, we don't want A3. It should be in the attendance database. We want to make sure it's AP3. Okay, so we need to fix that here. AP3 is where we want those classes to run here, and then run that. Okay, that looks good. We've got our class information here. Our dates, formats, we don't need them formatted here. We have some formulas. I didn't go over this formula. Let me go over this one when you can. So basically what I want to do is I want to run a sum if, and then I want to divide. I want to know the total scores, and I want to divide it by the number of scores. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to sum if the attendance scores, and I want to base it only on those with the specific student ID. There's that word again, AK3. Then attendance class. I want to know the class based on this class ID in AP4. The lesson date must be greater than or equal to the from date. The lesson date must be less than or equal to the to date. And I want to divide that by basically how many different quizzes, tests, scores, how many scores for that specific class. So I want to know how many for that class ID. When we bring that formula in, it's the average score of all the tests for that class. So we know that. So they're bringing that formula down. All right, good. I'm glad I got to show you that part of it. So that's important. And that's just going to simply bring that formula all the way down. Once we have that, we can then bring it back inside our dashboard right here. So when I select on that, it's going to bring it. So now we just need to update the conditional formatting. They didn't get brought over. So let's figure out why that conditional formatting didn't get brought over. Update that, go in conditional formatting, manage those rules, and we see that it's going to be based on CD. But what I want to do is I want to base it on the destination. So we can do that. What is that destination here? And that destination is, we can base it on the destination based on here, located in I8. So why don't we just add in that destination here inside the conditional formatting? So all we do is conditional manage those rules and change it to I8, and that'll work just fine. I8, and the reason is because we don't bring the report over again, right? We're not bringing it over again. We're just loading it. We didn't bring it back in here and then load it, and we didn't bring it back into our staging area, which is fine. So click OK, and then apply, and then OK. So now that's the way I like it. All righty, that looks good. Now when we reload the report here and reload that, now we have our conditional formatting brought in. So now when we select it, notice that we have everything here, our average score here. All right, that's really good. Now all we need to do is just either print one or print them all, and that's just with 2 simple macros. So let's get them written up, and then I'm going to let you go on this final incredible training. Located here. Okay, so we've got that. Now all we need to do is just print either the selected report, or we need to print all of them in just 2 macros. So writing that up here, let's go ahead and write the first one here. That's going to be very, very simple. It's going to be here. We can just use dashboard.page setup. Set up that page. I'm going to set that print area. Print area. What is that print area is going to be? It's going to be equal to here dashboard.range. I5 is our first one. I5 through N is the last column. And what about the last row? And what is that last row? It's going to be basically based on the dashboard also. Dashboard.range. Range. I'm going to use XL up. I'm going to use that based on here. So all we need to do is just clear that out. Not on A. In this case, we're going to base it on column I. I want to know the last result row based on I. So I is going to get us our last row. Dot, all right, so we need dot address. I want to know the address of that. That is it. That's going to be give us our, it's going to set that print area. Then all we need to do is print it out dashboard.range print out. Print out, what are we printing out? Well, we're going to print out, we don't need to specify any from or to or copies or preview. The active printer will use just the active printer, print to file, and then ignore printing areas and then false. We don't want to ignore those. Okay, so that's it. So now all we need to do is assign that macro to that button that we used, this print selected. So this I'm going to assign it to both the icon and the button itself. Right click them, assign the macro, paste that in, click OK. All right, so we do need to update these dates. We need date format, so we can do them here. Once we update those here, just bring that all the way down, set those general here to the short date, and then I'm going to bring these out a little bit. We need both of these columns a little bit bigger. Okay, let's rerun that here and then select on it. Now we've got our date formats here. We've got our scores. We've got our screen. Now we can print the select, and let's take a look. It's going to print out to my Snagit, which is my default printer, and we'll see that it's been printed out. Okay, good. That looks good. Now all we need to do is just run a loop. I want to do the same thing for all of them. In fact, we're going to start in this macro. I'm going to start in F and go all the way down, and we're just going to repeat it for all of those students. So that's the last macro that we need to write. So again, all we need to do is just focus on the dashboard with dashboard. And also what we want to do is we need the last row. I need to know the last row is going to be based on F. In this case, F equals column F is what our last student's going to be located on. That's going to set it in column F. We can then set our last row, making sure if the last row is less than, let's bring this down so we can see both here. If the last row is less than 6 and exit out, that means there's no student. Less than 6, then exit sub. Assuming that we have students, we can then move on. We can run a loop. Okay, I want to dimension the report. We've already have the report row dimension all the way up here in our top here. So report row here, this is the one we're going to focus on. I just want to make sure I got that right. For report row, it's equal to 6 to the last row. Close our loop. Next report row. Inside that loop, what do I want to do? I want to set the specific student. How are we going to do that? Easily, we just select it. Dot range, F, and the report row. Just select it, because when we select it, that macro is going to run. Select, the macro is going to run automatically. Selecting it. Now all we need to do is just print it out. Pretty much easy. All we need to do is just run this here. We don't need the word dashboard because we're already inside. Run that page setup here, because the last row could be dynamic. There could be more classes or less classes, so we don't know. Set the print area here, true or false, and it's going to go for every single student. So now we're just going to, once we select it, it's going to load that data in here. Then it's going to set the print area. Then it's going to print out. That's all we need to do. Very, very simple. Very easy. Saving our work here, and then what we're going to do is assign this macro. Copy this macro to our print all button, right click on here, go inside here, click on here and the icon, we want both, and then assign that macro, paste it in and click OK. Print all the report cards. It's going to individually print every single one of them, just like that. Very cool. All right, you see it's printing out. Now we've printed all the report cards. Wow, awesome. It's been an incredible training, an incredible series. I'm so glad for those of you who stuck with us, and I really appreciate it. It's been a long one. I don't know how many really long ones I'm going to do. I've got some incredible trainings coming up. I got an updated POS. I've got an automated invoicing coming up with payments. It's going to be great training. I got so many. Thank you for sticking with us. I really do appreciate that. We'll see you next week for a brand new training. Thanks again.